fixed. But this wouldn't be very logical of me because the money that I've already spent on this car is gone. There's no getting it back. So all I should be concerned with is what's going to cost me the most in the future. In economics, costs from the past that you can't get back are referred to as sunk costs, and these shouldn't have an influence on our decisions about future investing. However, the sunk cost fallacy is the phenomenon where people do just that. They let their past costs influence them more than they should. Research has actually shown that the more sunk costs a person has in a project, the more optimistic they'll feel about that project's chances for success, and also the more likely they are to continue investing in that project. This is also known as throwing good money after bad. So the money that you have that you could be spending on something potentially more successful, you continue to spend on something that's already cost you money. Now, letting your past costs influence your investments isn't necessarily so bad if you have something worth investing in. Say Apple, for example. However, if what you're investing in is failing, then you're in trouble. The vast majority of research on sunk costs is in the context of economics, and there's very little research considering it in the context of romantic relationships. The problem is, in relationships, sometimes it's very hard to tell whether you're investing in an Apple relationship or a Circuit City relationship. There is, however, a tradition of viewing relationships in economic terms. Social exchange theory, for example, views relationships through a cost-benefits analysis. There's also plenty of research on relationship investments. These are resources that we devote to our relationships in order to make them successful that would be hard to get back if the relationship ended. So this could be time, energy, maybe you have a kid with your partner, that's a huge investment. It could be material things, maybe you dished out the big bucks to get them a new iPod for Christmas. Relationship investments have been shown to positively correlate with a number of relationship-promoting behaviors, such as willingness to sacrifice, accommodation, forgiveness, and overall has been shown to lead to more commitment in the relationship. Now, it stands to reason that these behaviors would then lead to more investing in the relationship. And this is a good thing in a happy, healthy relationship. However, what happens in the context of a failing relationship? Might one of the reasons why people stay in bad relationships be because they're being influenced by everything they've already invested in the relationship? So this was our initial research question. And we hypothesized that individuals who had more invested in their relationship basically had more sunk costs in the relationship, and would therefore be more likely to commit the sunk cost fallacy, throwing good investments after bad, by continuing to invest in the relationship even if it was failing. So we ran a pilot study. We had 50 participants, all of whom were currently in a romantic relationship. Participants first completed a measurement of how much they've currently invested in their relationship. So they responded to items such as, I've put a great deal into our relationship that I would lose if the relationship were to end, and many aspects of my life have been linked to my partner, recreational activities, etc., and I would lose all of this if we were to break up. And they responded on a 0 to 8 scale from do not agree at all to agree completely. After the investment measurement, the participants then read a series of failing relationship scenarios. These depicted their current relationship failing. So for instance, one scenario had their partner becoming overly critical. So they read, your partner's become very critical of you. She's always making suggestions of how you can improve yourself. Your partner isn't able to accept you for who you are and won't stop trying to change you. You do a lot for your partner, but lately you feel like you're being taken for granted. Your partner never thanks you anymore, and they never do anything for you in return. In fact, you do so much for them that you don't have time to do things for yourself. You've had several discussions with your partner, but nothing's changed, and it doesn't seem like it will. So clearly, not a very good situation. Other failing relationship scenarios included the partners constantly fighting and losing all attraction for each other. Each scenario included information to suggest that the relationship was definitely failing, and despite efforts, things were not changing. After reading each scenario, participants then answered questions about how much they would be willing to continue investing in the relationship given these circumstances. So they responded to items like, how likely is it you would continue to invest time in this relationship? How likely is it that you would continue to invest emotionally in this relationship? And they answered on a scale from 1 to 10. Participants also indicated how willing they would be to end the relationship and how likely they were to continue investing financially in the relationship. Our results supported our hypotheses that those who had more invested currently in their relationship were more likely to continue investing in the relationship if it began to fail. As you can see, positive correlations were found between sunk costs and willingness to continue investing in each of the 3 individual scenarios. We also found a negative correlation between sunk costs and willingness to end the relationship. We ran a t-test and found that our participants were significantly more willing to continue investing emotionally in the relationship than financially. So why was it that our participants were being influenced by their past investments to continue investing in the failing relationship? One possible explanation is that they were loss aversive. Loss aversion suggests that we as individuals are more psychologically impacted by losses than by equivalent gains. So, for example, say you're walking down the street one day and a $5 bill falls out of your pocket and blows away. Chances are you're going to be more upset about losing that $5 than you would be excited if you found $5 on the street. How would you feel if this was your financial portfolio? Perhaps the loss on oil draws the majority of your attention. How would you feel about this? Rationally, you should feel about the same about it because it's all worth the same. But chances are this one might cause more anxious feelings because it shows more losses. So we thought that maybe when considering ending a relationship, individuals let their past investments influence their decision because they're more focused on losing those investments than on what they could be gaining elsewhere. So for our second study, we hypothesized that individuals who focused on what they would potentially gain if their relationship ended would be less likely to commit the sunk cost fallacy and continue investing in a failing relationship. So again, we had a typical college sample, 134 participants, all of whom are currently in relationships. We added a relationship satisfaction scale in which participants responded to items such as, I feel satisfied with our relationship, my relationship is much better than other relationships, from a 0 to 8 scale from do not agree at all to agree completely. For our manipulation, participants were randomly assigned to one of 2 groups and given writing prompts. So those in the gain condition read the following instructions. If your relationship ended, think about the various things you would gain. For each of the following categories, please list things you would gain if you are no longer with your partner. They then responded open-endedly to a series of questions such as these. How would you gain time? How would you gain energy? How would you gain socially? How would you gain your sense of self? Those in the lose condition read the same exact instructions, answered the same exact questions, but as you can see, the word gain was just switched out for the word lose. So how would you lose time if your relationship ended? How would you lose energy if your relationship ended? And so on. After completing the writing prompts, participants then read the same exact failing relationship scenarios that we used in the first study, and also completed the same measure of how much they would be willing to continue investing in the relationship. We ran t-tests on the data, and the results supported our hypothesis that those who wrote about what they would potentially gain if their relationship ended were significantly less likely to continue investing in the failing relationship than those that wrote about what they would lose. As you can see, the same pattern was significant in each of the individual scenarios. So for the critical partner, the constant fighting, and the loss of attraction. And these results stayed the same after controlling for relationship length, relationship satisfaction, and gender. Now, in economics, it's been long assumed that people take a rational approach to decision making, where they'll assess the value of various options and choose the one that's going to yield the most gain. More recently, however, this has been called into question due to instances of irrational decision-making, like the sunk cost fallacy. The current two studies build upon relationship research by demonstrating that investments in failing relationships can also be viewed as sunk costs and lead to similar irrational decision-making. Now, one of the reasons why it might be hard for people to make rational decisions in relationships is because relationships involve a number of behavioral investments. So time, for instance, emotion, energy, and these are a lot harder to keep track of mentally than tangible investments like money, for instance. This would also explain why our participants were more willing to continue investing emotionally than they were financially in failing relationships. Study 2 found that loss aversion might also be playing a role in the sunk cost fallacy in relationships. When you end a relationship, you're not only losing that relationship, but you're also accepting that everything you've invested in it is lost as well. Our results indicate that participants might have been too focused on the fear of losing their relationship and everything they've invested in it to consider investing their resources elsewhere. Business research has shown that focusing on motivations for growth can lead to less escalation of commitment. And similarly, our studies showed that those who focused on what they would potentially gain if their relationship ended were less likely to commit the sunk cost fallacy and throw good investments after bad. Sorry. This adds to existing literature, which has shown that focusing on overall gains leads to more rational decision making. And we've even established a simple writing exercise as an effective way to do this. So the overall take-home message of the research is that if people make a more concerted effort to focus on what they could potentially gain outside of their relationship, maybe even through a simple writing exercise like our writing prompts, they might be better equipped to remove themselves from failing or unhealthy relationships. Thank you all for your time. Is there time for questions?
Yes.
Are there any questions? Okay.
First of all, congratulations. For study number 2, how do you think your result would look like if you give both participants both gain and loss questionnaires so they could answer both gain and loss? Because I feel like they've been primed with gaining, so that's what they had in their heads. So when they answer about investment, they kind of answer accordingly to what they've been primed by just answering.
Sure. And that's exactly right. And that's what we were trying to do. We were trying to prime people to focus on gains, and other people were primed to focus on losses. And our hypothesis is that naturally we tend to focus more on losses due to loss aversion. It's an interesting question of what would happen if we were to consider both. And I think ideally in a real world scenario, that would be the ideal thing to do. You want to be thinking about potential losses of ending a relationship and gains, and you want to have that balance. So as far as how it would affect the data, I can't be exactly sure, but as far as the application of the research, I think that that would be the ideal scenario, that a person is considering both losses and